Welcome to the Retrospect podcast, a show where people come together from different walks of life and discuss a topic from their generation's perspective. My name is Ian, and as always, I'm joined by Jason.
Hello, everyone.
And Stoney.
Hello.
Welcome to the 152nd episode.
Wow.
That's
crazy.
Yeah, it's
isn't it?
amazing how these things add up over time.
I would like to say, starting off, that we got some fan mail. What was it? A text off of one of our websites. Where was it from? Indianapolis?
No. Yes, I think it was.
Indianapolis. And I apologize. We're still trying to figure that out. We can't respond. But we will post a website. The fan asked if Brandon Iglesias had a website, and we will be posting that and putting that up for everybody. So we apologize for not being able to respond to that, but we are working on it.
Yeah, I think he has a Substack that he uses to kind of publish his or to kind of gather all that material together.
Yep.
I think if you want a little bit more in depth, I think there's a fee you can register to some.
And I haven't, but part of my brain damage with the accident, I forgot my phone, and it was on my phone, and that's my fault, and I apologize. I own my mistake. So y'all please bear with me and forgive me on that one, but we will have it for y'all very quickly.
Those episodes seem to trend well.
Yes.
It's very interesting material, and kind of makes me think about some of the things he talks about with all this stuff in our food and water and
electronics
and everything. Yeah. It kind of touches on something that's happened recently with with Robert F. Kennedy suspending his race and endorsing Donald Trump for president, but some of his things that he's championed for many years, while many on the left have kind of distanced themselves from him, is his insistence on the contamination of our food and stuff like that, which I can imagine how far those tendrils reach through our society and what sort of industries would be affected if you start banning this and banning that and all. I don't think a lot of people want to know.
Oh, simple thing. The bread made in America is illegal in Europe. 100% illegal in Europe. You can't sell it. You can't bring it. Nothing. That's our bread, because there's so many things in our bread that Europe doesn't want it.
Well, the only bread I eat is the Ezekiel bread from that's frozen bread. You can't leave it out. It has to be frozen, so I take it out when I need it.
Well, it only has like 7 ingredients. Where normal white bread here in America has got 39 ingredients.
Yeah, I don't use white bread anymore.
36 of them are petroleum-based chemicals.
Yeah, so I don't do that. So it's I've tried to do my part, but yeah, just talking about that just kind of reminds me of just kind of think there's just kind of this awakening that's happening about what's kind of going on here,
right? And
so neither here nor there, but another topic for another time.
Yeah.
You know what I did find out talking about food? And I think I may have known this before the accident, but it just came back to me in my realm a couple of days ago. Baby carrots are not actually baby carrots.
Right.
They're the misshapen carrots just kind of carved down to be baby carrots.
There you go.
So when they can't sell an ugly carrot, it becomes a baby carrot.
It becomes a baby carrot.
Yeah, how about that?
Let's change the nomenclature on it.
That's right.
Same thing.
Look at the sweet baby carrot.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
Interesting.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. So what do we got on the dock for today?
Ancestry.com.
Okay.
And the crimes that have been solved using Ancestry.com. And it's really interesting because they have a term for it now called genetic genealogy.
Right.
Pretty recently, the big one was the Golden State Killer, Joseph DeAngelo. We had talked about this on a previous episode a couple weeks ago about how they found his cousin over here and followed it all the way over, a couple of states away to where he was. And it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
And the early numbers right now is over 600 cases have been solved using genetic genealogy.
Wow.
Yeah. It's it's a technology that has definitely really started taking off since 2018.
Wow, that recent.
Yes. Yes,
Interesting.
it's very recent.
Yeah, what's happening is law enforcement now are utilizing a lot of these public databases. I know people that have submitted their DNA to Ancestry.com or to their other
23andMe, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies out there that deal with this. So what's happening is slowly, you're having third-party databases being created of DNA that the police are looking at and going, we might be able to utilize this to help us identify cold cases that there's just no leads. Things have kind of dried up. But yes, it's a...
it's been seen as
there's a lot of this going on now.
It's an increasingly as being used as this powerful forensic tool that works on cold cases. Its success when used is high. This is growing, and just a widespread application for it for a number of ways to use this is fascinating. Yeah. And it's getting as when DNA started or fingerprints started, the technology is growing exponential on what they can do with it. And now they're having a whole new platform on training and infrastructure on how to use it, and people how you can use it, because some of these old guys, they're wanting to use it, but how do you really do it?
Right.
And so they're having new training programs just to help people understand the whole platform, the whole, use of it.
Well, you mentioned the Golden State Killer. That, was interesting. He was a former police officer.
Yes, he was.
Wow.
Yeah. Matter of fact, he entered a plea to avoid the death penalty at age 70. But he was given 12 life sentences. But
man.
There have been other kind of famous cases that have been solved.
The Boston Strangler.
The death of Helen Przinski.
Yes.
That was one that I saw. She went missing in 1980. She was believed to have vanished on her way to the bus stop, and the next time anyone saw her was when her body was discovered in a field. She had been raped and stabbed to death, and they were just unable to find any leads on her, but not until many years later, and then made use of the site 23andMe.
Wow.
In 2018 in an effort to learn more about his family. His name was Jesse Still. And like many other people, submitted this thing. I want to find out my cousins and grandparents and great-grandparents and all that other stuff. And what she couldn't have known at the time is she was tipping off the police of what happened 40 years earlier.
That's wild.
Still's DNA was flagged by law enforcement. It shared some of the DNA with genetic material on file for the murder. Not Stills herself, of course, but a family member. Stills turned out to be the cousin of Helen Przinski's killer.
Wow.
Ironically, Still added her DNA to the site because she was a fan of true crime and had been very interested in the case of the Golden State Killer.
Wow.
She knew that the killer had been caught thanks to DNA from a genealogy site and wanted to upload her own in hopes of maybe it would be helpful to somehow find, another one. So 2 months later, law enforcement contacted her about a connection to the killer. With Still's help, law enforcement built a family tree and came up with James Clanton, a relative she didn't even know she had.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And that was that crime happened in the 80s, you said?
Happened in the 80s, 1980.
Yeah,
wow.
There was another one in 89. George and Catherine Peacock were brutally murdered in their Vermont home. And that sat unsolved for 30 years until genetic genealogy led to the arrest of Michael Louise in 2020. And that was another fascinating case because they had zero clues. They had nothing.
Well, in a lot of these cases, they're not going to have a, a smoking gun, so to speak, to go to. I mean, because, look, some of these people that commit these crimes, they kind of know, okay, what do I need to do to cover my tracks the best way possible. But it's, now with DNA, I think it might dive into another topic.
That's
time,
okay.
But I can almost now see a point in the future where everybody's DNA will be taken at birth.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
No,
now we're talking about something else.
Hold on now. Okay, we can go there. All right, I'm ready to go there already, because I would like to explore now that Ancestry.com has been bought.
Mm-hmm.
Guess who bought them?
Wasn't it BlackRock?
BlackRock. So
they seem to be around a lot of things.
Why would BlackRock want to have people's DNA and genetic information? What purpose?
I can definitely see the beginnings of mandatory genetic.
Maybe. I mean, I take obviously on this show, and a lot of times with situations like that, I think I take a more opposite side approach. I think it's a lot to do with money. I think, especially now that like the law enforcement is getting involved, I think there's probably more money involved now, especially if you're able to kind of tighten down on the reins a little bit.
Hey, that little chump change.
I'm not talking about chump change. I'm not talking about chump change from
what law enforcement's going to do is going to be chump change compared to the $69 trillion that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street.
I got you. But what I'm saying is like if you hold all of 23andMe's database, anytime someone wants to give, they're going to pay to you. Anytime the government wants to try and take, they're going to have to pay to you. And what I'm saying is that the second now you have it all and you're the owner of it, the second the government's like, hey, we got to get DNA, you go like, oh, it's going to be a pretty high margin, to get that kind of stuff. That's all I'm saying. It's like it's all just like leverage is what I'm saying.
Well, I'm going to tell you, some of these cases, some of these more famous cases that have been solved, I think
we'll revisit this toward the end of the show because I'm not done with that.
The Cobb County rapist.
Yes.
1999, there was a series of 3 unsolved rapes that took place in Cobb County, Georgia. The police were able to gather DNA from the crimes, but there was no match in the criminal database to narrow down the field to a suspect. Law enforcement went to Parabon Nanolabs, a company that specializes in something called DNA phenotyping. That's a whole different thing.
Whole other thing.
Right.
Yep.
Which can assist law enforcement in solving crimes. Phenotyping is being able to predict the appearance of something based on genetic markers. So essentially the company can analyze DNA and then predict what the suspect looks like. I could see how that could possibly can go wrong,
Biases,
but it's promising. It can't give a precise photo of the person, but it can tell you things like hair color, eye color, and skin color. Mix in DNA ancestry data, and you have a very solid tool for catching killers. With the help of Parabon, law enforcement was able to find a distant ancestor of the killer on the GED match. That allowed them to narrow the field to a suspect in the rape case. Police found a suspect who already had a criminal history of burglary and being a peeping Tom. They took a DNA sample from the suspect for a comparison and confirmed that he was, in fact, the rapist.
Oof.
However, shortly after providing the sample to law enforcement, the man committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
Preventing the case from going any further.
It's been that process has kind of been compared to like the VIN number of a vehicle.
Right.
Because you can take that VIN number of the vehicle, enter it into the computer, and it can tell you exactly how that vehicle left the factory.
Right.
Hair color,
Yeah.
Some facial structures, height, blah, 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 blah. But then you have to take it the next step on yourself, and hopefully they didn't change their hair color or paint the car or whatever.
Right.
So, but it's still fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Here's another one. The chameleon. Did you read about this one?
Yes.
Curtis Kimball is a murderer. So is Larry Vanier and Gordon Jensen. Mm-hmm. Of course, they're all the same person.
Yep.
I see.
Kimball famously admitted at a pretrial hearing in 2003 that he had murdered Yunsun Jun, despite pleading no contest to second-degree murder previously. Kimball, whose name is actually Terry Padir Ramison, had previously served time for child abandonment and other crimes, and no one knew at the time that he had a host of aliases and had been a prolific serial killer of women and children for years. This led to law enforcement calling him the chameleon. Police were able to connect the man who abandoned a 5-year-old daughter in the 1980s to the murder of Insoon June and determined that Kimball, Veneer, and Jensen were all the same man, but they still did not know he was Terry Padilla Ramison at this point, and would learn as much for over a decade later. When police performed a paternity test on Lisa, the girl was arrested. He was arrested for abandoning in the 80s. They found that Ramison was not the father. The man he claimed to be, Curtis Kimball, simply did not exist before the arrest. Police had the girl, now in her 20s, put her DNA on Ancestry.com and 23andMe. The data turned up some distant cousins, and a family tree was built from the data they found. They were able to find the girl's grandfather, whose own daughter had long ago gone missing. The daughter ended up being Lisa's mother. The grandfather last saw his granddaughter in 1981 when she left with her mother and her mother's boyfriend, a man named Bob Evans. Evans was, of course, Ramison.
Wow.
One of the things I kind of remember about that case was serial killers are very specific in what their target is. And it was women and children. And he had different personalities. And there was some speculation on if he was not 2 or 3 serial killers. Not just the one serial killer, one body,
right,
but each personality had a different target.
Oh, wow.
And that's one of the things that kind of threw them off, because it would be a murder of a child or then a woman. And then they were trying to, thinking they had multiple situations going on, and it was just one guy who possibly could have been 2 or 3 serial killers in the same brain. Wow. But I don't know if that was ever discussed, how far they went with that once they realized it was just him, and, if they hit the psychology about that or not. But can you imagine that, having 3 serial killers in the same person?
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you what. This is truly a fascinating topic because of the implications of the amount of people that are inputting DNA, voluntarily inputting, their DNA data that is being collected by these third-party vendors. And now the police are utilizing that. Now, it's interesting that this is happening. But I also pulled up an article here I'm looking at. It's called, "Is it ethical to use genealogy data to solve crimes?"
Why would it not be?
It says, authorities recently arrested the suspected Golden State Killer, serial rapist, and murderer who terrorized California decades ago. Armed with DNA from several crime scenes, the police cracked this cold case utilizing a new resource, online genealogy data. Although criminal investigators have long used DNA analysis, this case is notable because the implicating genetic information was not obtained from forensic resource created specifically for criminal justice purposes. Since the excitement of solving this infamous case subsided, public conversation increasingly has become focused on the ethics of using genealogy data for crime solving. Ethics discussions include 3 interrelated topics: informed consent, privacy, and justice.
I get that. I was going to say, if you accepted that you were giving your DNA over to this database, I almost assume that's what it's going to be used for. Or, it's going to be stored and cataloged. And if, I guess, the government wants to try and look into it, that's okay. But I do see how, if you're signing up for that service, you probably should have, a waiver that's I consent to having my... But then at that point, I don't know. It just feels...
But basically, you're doing that. When you're putting your name in this site,
right,
you're saying, please use my information to find other people in my family tree.
Right.
So you're kind of actually doing that. But let's just say let's say a long-lost cousin you don't know puts their information in. How comfortable are you now being part of a possible criminal investigation because of somebody you may or may not have ever met, and Now you're part of a criminal investigation.
But again, for me, like let's say for instance, my mom uses one of those sites, and she has. I'm not sure if I think she put her DNA into it, but she likes to find the whole family tree situation. So I have like a direct relative, and if for some reason like a cousin of mine that's able to be connected to me has done a crime, I mean, unless I'm being blamed for it, or unless I have to like go, I'm going to go, I have to pay for it, like, or like justice wise, I'd say I'm fine with it. Like, especially if it's going to help, like especially if it's going to keep down killers and rapists, which are like, I mean, two of the biggest things that I don't want those kind of people to be around anyways. Well, and if my DNA can kind of help that happen, like I'm okay with it. But or if my family tree can somehow find that out.
I've got some
but I know that maybe I understand people are. Maybe I'm just thinking of this from a different perspective. I understand people being concerned about privacy and security and all that kind of stuff, and I guess the government having the access. But like, you carry around this, and like this, I think is, and by this I mean your cell phone. You carry around cell phones, like know your location and know your algorithm, and it's like, so I think people. I don't think people like the action of the government, or I don't say government, but like law enforcement entities being able to access your stuff whenever I think the World Wide Web knows more about you than
in a way you're spot on there, because if you think about it, what was it when you watched the TV, the Nielsen report, you filled out this information, and then they put this box on your TV, and it monitored what you were watching, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how they gathered their information before. And now it's all on your phone. Right. What are you looking at? What are you buying? Everything. And so they take that information. This is just another way to get information. Right. Hottie Dr. Miranda, she does the little receipt photograph thing where you get, so many points. Oh, yeah. And all that is they're paying you for the right to track your purchasing habits. Right. Or, and I like to put this in parentheses, the receipts that you find on the ground or left in the gas pump or whatever, because you get 25 points for any receipt. Right. And so whenever I find a receipt, I hand them to her and get her little 25 points. So, but that's just another information gathering tool. Right. And in a way, kind of that would be one of the things that we will explore later with BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. It is information gathering. Right. And then it becomes into what purpose are you going to do that for? Right.
For me, like I get the whole conversation with that. And here's where my hypothetical scenarios always come in and probably shoot me in the foot. When I look at it, I think you have the lesser of two evils, I believe. I understand that people probably don't like the fact that their privacy is being breached in some way, even though like I would wager that whenever you sign up for one of these DNA services, that you probably do accept some sort of terms and conditions that do say in the fine print somewhere. Yes, so I get what you're saying with that, but to be honest, you probably already have consented to something that you probably didn't read in the terms and conditions, quote unquote. But when I think about it, in my spheres of like the lesser of two evils, you have TikTok, which like I know is like tracking a bunch of stuff, even though they claim they don't. Like I don't know the depths in which like something like that is operating on your phone or like tracking your history or knows.
Oh, it's happening.
Or no, that's
it's
what I'm saying.
Happening. Any way you look at it, it's happening.
The deep tendrils into knowing everything about you that you just like because it's entertainment and it's fun. I wonder how many of those people are also saying like, I don't like the fact that law enforcement can access my DNA, but they have TikTok. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where it's like this like juxtaposition of like you stand on this Apple box and preach this about ancestry.com or whatever, but yet you're a hypocrite because you have like
most people don't realize that's how they make most of their money.
Exactly.
One day, a little while ago, Miranda and I were talking. One of the things that attracted to her was we're both avid readers. We have a multi-thousand book library together. And I just jokingly said one weekend, you know what we need in our life? We need a rolling ladder. Ladder wall. And the very next weekend, it pops up on the thing on Marketplace, right on top of her page, a rolling ladder. Yep. A whole 12-foot wall,
Right.
big
It's beautiful.
thing,
Yeah.
huge. And they're listening.
Yeah.
They're listening.
And all I'm trying to say is you can consent to that
Mm-hmm.
over here in that realm. Or in my personal opinion, like I have potentially my DNA in a database that then is able to crack down on rapists and serial killers. And I'm like, I'm far more okay in that camp.
This was actually going to be one of the questions I had for y'all.
Okay.
From a generational perspective, given that Gen X and millennials are more accustomed to sharing personal information online, because see, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't like to do that. I said, how do you feel about sharing something as personal as genetic data? Is it different from sharing other types of data?
I do. I'm just trying to say the lesser of two evils. I don't have my personal DNA in that database, but I know that my mom does. Which
So
means,
then you do actually.
So, but again, and that was, I didn't consent to that.
Right.
So, I mean, but at the same time, it's not like they have my connection to her. They don't have my DNA in the
Right.
database. So, like, that's.
What about you, Jason? Would you?
I'm a little
would you
more okay,
send your DNA in?
Well, but I almost actually did it not long ago because my sister's all into this stuff.
Yeah.
And she submitted her stuff, got back. I had registered, I had paid for it, but I never kind of followed through, and I never got the kit to submit the DNA. But
I do think it is helpful. I will say to like find out some pre-existing conditions or health benefits. Like there are.
Look, it's like with any of this stuff. It's how it's used.
Yeah.
It's like technology.
Of course.
Technology is neutral. It's the intent of the person behind
Exactly.
it
That's right.
always
Right.
going to drive this. So, but just some trends here. Those kits are about $100,
Right.
On average. But consumers purchased the same number of at-home DNA kits in 2018 as in all previous years since 2012 combined. So this thing is kind of growing quite rapidly. And CNBC reported in 2019, at that point, researchers found that 26 million people had shared DNA samples with 4 of the most prominent ancestry and health databases. But it's not clear how often criminal investigators actually use those databases. So that's now some of them basically say they have to have a warrant. They'll come out and say we don't share your personal health information. Then you get into HIPAA and those kind of issues that you talk about. But they're projecting 100 million.
Wow.
Of Americans that will have their data, they have their DNA in some sort of either Ancestry, 23, any one of those type of those databases. So, yeah, they said I'm reading something here. This was reported in an article in Science. This was reported in 2020. If you're white, live in the United States, and a distant relative has uploaded their DNA to a public ancestry database, there's a good chance an internet sleuth can identify you from a DNA sample you left somewhere.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, the BlackRock CEO, Steven Schwarzman, is a member of the International Business Council of the World Economic Forum, which now means the World Economic Forum has access to millions of DNA records and billions of identifying records. And this is an organization dedicated to controlling the world's healthcare, finances, food consumption, and population. And just for the record, they paid $4.7 billion for those records. And at this point in my research, BlackRock is also actively trying to buy up the other DNA systems.
Oh, because they're probably looking at that because they see the popularity of it.
Of course.
And
Monopoly,
it's a money thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm going to buy up those things because ultimately people are not going to stop doing it.
Of course. And like I said, and I'm not saying I have any inside information, but like I said, the second that, the government or, a law enforcement agency wants to try and access it, put it behind a paywall for them. Not only do you get money from your customers, but also the people trying to access the data. Be like, we'll get money on both sides. And I own all of them.
I still think that's chump change compared to their end game. and their end game.
Right.
If you look at it through population control and the fact that the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization and all of this want to, by 2050, end the life of 2 to 4 billion people on this planet, what are they going to do with this information?
Well, but how is that going to make them money?
They're not going to have to spend money on poor people. They're going to be able to target and control exactly their money. Rent. Why are they buying homes? Because they're only going to rent them to you. Because you won't be able to own anything. And while there are so many people, and I wish I'd have had my phone, I had some more information on here from the CEO of one of these organizations, and he called it wasteful people. How much money they're spending on wasteful people. And is that not, how do you target somebody?
I think that ties into some of the fears that people had, the ethics of using this stuff.
Yep.
When it comes to insurance purposes in identifying genetic defects. As this technology gets, more and more refined, it always does.
Right.
It kind of wants to.
Well, it's sparking huge debates on privacy and the Fourth Amendment. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, the argument they would say is, there is some. Where is it at? I had it here that they were talking about the U.S. the Fourth Amendment. The use of, in essence, they're looking at it and saying the minute you submit your DNA, in essence, you're abandoning it. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like throwing your garbage. Yes. There's no expectation of privacy.
You have a right to privacy in your home, but the minute you walk out of your house, your privacy is done.
The minute I put my garbage out on the street,
then
the question is there an expectation of privacy at that point?
No, there's not.
And I think that's what they're saying with this DNA.
Once you put it out there,
you're putting out on a public, deal. So, they say a study in 2020 looked at the MyHeritage database, which contained just 1.28 million DNA samples, and determined that if you live in the United States and are of your European ancestry, there's 60% chance you have a third cousin or closer relative in the database, which is incredible.
Right. Mm-hmm. Again, I think I'm a little bit lost here about the whole privacy thing. Maybe it's because I feel like we live in a world where you don't have privacy to begin with.
That's true.
What I mean? So, I don't understand why. I think there's a lot of people that assume they have more privacy than they actually do.
Well, I think this goes back to something else that I put in that I thought was, there is this idea, people are, let me see if I can find exactly, here it is. It said, in biomedical research, substantial support exists for allowing broad consent evidence. Broad consent evidence suggests that people want researchers to ask permission to use their materials, but are comfortable with wide-ranging use thereafter. A distinction exists, however, between biomedical research and forensics. A person given broad consent to future biomedical research has a basic understanding that scientists will use his or her materials to produce generalizable medical knowledge, even if the exact details of that endeavor are unclear. In contrast, person might reasonably be surprised if his or her genealogical data were used in a criminal investigation.
Well, think about it. What's the Fifth Amendment?
Because the use is far afield from the original purpose from which the information was given. So I think where the question comes in is when I submit my thing to answer, the reason I'm doing this, and in my brain, I think the only reason that I'm doing this because I'm trying to find cousins, possibly, medical issues that might exist in my family tree somewhere. Not that I might be drawn into a criminal investigation, which has happened.
Well, the Fifth Amendment says I'm not going to. I plead the Fifth. Okay, I plead the fifth. I'm not going to answer that for fear I may incriminate myself. Well, I'm not going to put my DNA. Somebody, are you opening yourself up for that? Well, think about it like this. When COVID first came out, the big thing was that it was genetically designed by the Chinese to attack their elderly people. Now, I don't know if that was ever proven or not, but now that companies and institutions and governments fighting over this information, how easy is it going to be to target somebody with this massive amounts of information? Because that's what you need to target somebody, is you need their genetic information.
Maybe I am the wrong person for this, but like I know that like aside from maybe a couple of speeding tickets in my late teens, early 20s, I have a pretty clean record. Like I'm not a criminal. So like maybe I'm looking at this from the wrong perspective of like maybe if I did have a criminal past, I would be more apprehensive.
Worried about it, right?
But right now I'm thinking like what happens if I get pulled into some sort of criminal case because of a fourth cousin I never met? I'd be like, yeah, go ahead.
Go for it.
Let's figure it out. Especially if that person like has actually done a very bad, serious crime. That's part of me being a citizen of the U.S. Let's go ahead and let's make justice happen. Even though, I mean, now it'll probably be different. I think I may have a little bit harder time if it was like immediate family, but that still doesn't mean that I wouldn't want justice to happen.
Well,
and again, now, like I said, if I did have, criminal dealings, drug dealing, car stealing, heaven forbid, raping or killing somebody, then I would have a real problem with that. It's like, oh, my fourth cousin is in the database, and now they can track it down to me. That's where I'm coming from. Is it these people or I say these people, this conversation of like this worrying about privacy comes from this place of like thou dost protest too much. You're awfully defensive over there about this privacy that you think you have when in actuality I don't think you do.
But then you're on a slippery slope of what's best for the mass.
I got you.
Okay, now you're going, hey, we're going to take this right, we're going to slowly whittle this right away, and we're going to slowly this right away.
You're right.
Because it's better for the mass.
This is where I think people are kind of a little uneasy or not fully aware of how their DNA could be used once it's kind of put out there.
Right.
Back in 2014, a guy by the name of Michael Usury, he was a filmmaker based in New Orleans.
Okay.
He was visiting his parents' house when he received a phone call from the police. Usury said the officers wanted to check his vehicle because it matched a description of a car involved in a hit and run.
Okay.
The cop swung by and he agreed to head on down to the station. When I was walking out the door with them, I turned to the sergeant, who ended up being the sergeant of Idaho Falls Police Department. And I said, "So this is about a hit and run?" Usury said. And he goes, "Well, actually, Mr. Usury, we want to talk to you about some other things as well." The other thing was Angie Dodge, a young woman who was raped and murdered in Idaho in 1996. But genetic genealogy, which pointed to Usury, is not foolproof. And it went wrong.
I see.
So what happened, it ended up being tied to his father.
Wow.
But he was drug in and kind of given the
business.
The business.
He got the business.
About trying to
right
find out.
But that's part of that process.
And that's what I was going to say.
That's part of that process.
I'm not trying to condone that, because that is a mistake. But I think that with it being the first few iterations, I think things like that are going to happen. Like I said, and maybe I'm just a lapdog for the government, but I'm like, for me, when it comes to that sort of stuff, maybe it's because I haven't really had any kind of dealings with the police that I've ever had is either been because I did something wrong, either, speeding in a section I shouldn't have been, or there was one time, and I'll tell this brief story. I'm not sure if I told it on the show or not, or if I have, it's probably been long enough. There was one time where I was driving back. I was performing at a bar, as a musician, running sound for bands and all that stuff and all that. And the bar closes down at 2 a.m., give or take. So I'm driving back home, probably 30 minutes away. So at this point, it's probably 2:30 at night. And I am almost home. I mean, like a block or two away. And there are these two police officers that are at this gas station that I passed by on my way home at this time, and I'm in my dad's old truck. I think I was, again, late teens, early 20s. I don't think I owned my own vehicle, but my dad had this old truck that he let me use, old maroon kind of beat up truck. And as I was driving, I noticed the police lights behind me. And like I said, it's 2:30 at night, and I wasn't driving erratically, so I was like, oh man, here we go. Who knows what I did. So I pulled into like a church parking lot or something, and before I know it, it's not just one police officer, it's three of them. And they have the exit blocked off, and they have they got the spotlight on me, and they're like, please exit the vehicle. And I'm like, oh man, here we go. So I do what I've been taught and what I've learned from movies and all that kind of stuff. I exit the vehicle, hands up, going, hey, I don't got nothing to hide. I'm in an old beat up truck and I'm coming home. My alibi is I'm a musician. You can check the trunk. There's a guitar back there. And he was like, he asked for my ID and I gave him all my stuff and everything. And come to find out, there was a stolen vehicle by a similar description. And he's like, now that we see the license plate and your ID, none of that matches the stuff. But like we're looking for a truck that matches this description. Sorry to scare you so late at night. What you doing out? And I was like, musician performing, downtown at a bar. And he's like, all right. And again, like I said, I didn't have nothing to drink. I didn't do nothing else. I was like, I'm clean. Everything's fine. And he was like, and then funny enough, I was shaken up, And then one of the other police officers kind of threw out a little remark saying, hope it didn't scare you too bad. I was like, well, you definitely did.
Well, continuing my story with this Michael Usury, the filmmaker from New Orleans. He was 19 years old. He had traveled through Idaho Falls on a couple of occasions around the same time as Angie Dodge's murder.
Really?
Once for a Mormon mission trip, and another time for a ski vacation in Utah. But in 2014, detectives were interested in Usury because of his dad's DNA. 16 years ago, Usury's father had been convinced to submit to a cheek swab to a Sorensen database as part of the genealogy project, in which participation was encouraged by the Mormon Church. This DNA database was public, but only containing profiles of Y chromosomes and mitochondrial DNA. Thus, it could only trace paternal or maternal heritage.
Wow.
But police in Idaho Falls, which has a large Mormon population, saw an opening. When they ran semen from Dodge's murder scene through the database, they found a close match. 34 of the 35 letters belonging to Usury's father. Now, that's referring to the actual technology itself,
right.
That's a lot of scientific stuff, and we're not really
We're
qualified to really talk about all that, but just say 34 of those 35 markers belonged to Usury's father. They immediately eliminated my dad because he was too old, Usury said. But when they started doing research, they saw my short film, said Usury, who had co-produced a slasher film called Murderabilia, which includes the murder of a young girl.
Wow.
Usury said police grilled him for a couple hours before asking him for a cheek swab. He goes, well, do you see this warrant right here? It's signed by this judge, and that means you have to do this for us right here and right now. Usury was released, but he said he spent a worry-filled month before the police called to say his DNA wasn't a match.
Wow.
There's a long and documented history of the misuse of forensic evidence in criminal justice, said Aaron Murphy, a law professor at New York University. It's an important point to remember because DNA, too, can be misused.
Yep.
So I can understand why people, after hearing about these kind of stories, would be like, I don't necessarily, when I submitted my DNA for this, that it could possibly involve me in something.
Right.
I could, as I'm saying, as an individual, would anybody want to go through that? Would your life want to be side rail for a month going, oh my God, these people are going to pin me for murder.
And what does that do for your job? When they come pick you up at your job now and they handcuff you and they
people
bring you
know
in
about
or your
this-
apartment complex or wherever you live.
And I think this goes back to what they were talking about, that possibly using for genetic markers and and for insurance purposes. And the insurance can be like, I can see how this would evolve to a point where insurance will be like, well, we need to see if you're predisposed to certain things, and if you are, well,
your insurance is going to go up.
Your insurance is going to go up, and so I can see where some of the fear.
But I can also see, again, maybe I'm being devil's advocate. I could also see in the future where if that is more ubiquitous, we kind of move on to that like there are anti-discrimination policies that are in place. Where like now that we have all this idea, all this stuff, I find it hard to believe that in a world where we're trying to be more inclusive towards everything, that we allow insurance companies to
until they make it marketplace. Well, if you want insurance, you have to submit your genetic DNA, and the insurance company will now give you an estimate on what it's going to be based on that. So you just took out your laws there.
Maybe
that's where they're going.
Maybe, or like I said, or having some. I don't know. Like I said, I'm more optimistic. That I think I choose to look at things differently.
According to some of the largest these third-party DNA databases, Ancestry DNA is of course the largest. Origin was here in the United States. It launched in 2012 at 23 million. National DNA Index, that's law enforcement, has 20.6. That's even less than what the private one. I mean, the private one. 23andMe, also United States company, 2006, 14 million.
Yeah.
MyHeritage, that's actually in Israel, 2003, 7.4 million. National DNA Database, that's United Kingdom, that's a law enforcement database, 7.1, and I believe they're the largest one in Europe. Family Tree DNA, also a United States company, 1999, 2 million, and GED Match, United States, 2010, 1.4 million. I was reading about the founder of GED Match. He's down in Florida. It's actually not far from Mar-a-Lago.
Really?
Yeah. Of where that company is. So, yeah. I mean, it's I said this is an interesting. It'd be very interesting to see how this technology unfolds over time. I've always said I believe it's coming. That at birth they're going to be collecting your DNA, and you're going to have a
what did they do?
A national
at birth they collect your fingerprints and your footprints, because it was fingerprints and footprints was the forensic
way of identifying
That's
you.
a way you identify you. So now I don't think we're that far from that, Jason. I really don't.
Right.
No, I don't either. I think, and as I said, that could be a good thing
or a bad thing.
I could see a lot of positives if everybody had a DNA sample that they can use. You could probably eliminate a lot of missing person cases, and a lot of criminal activity could be addressed.
Right.
But I can also see
some abuse
of that,
right. And I think in both camps, again, I could be very wrong, and I'm always willing to be wrong. But I think in both camps, I think that there is good and bad that can be done. I'm not saying either one's perfect. But I do think that the technology is interesting. I do think it could help us, maybe more than it can harm us.
Love to get somebody on the show that can really talk about the science behind the DNA. And that may be a possibility. That would have come in handy on this episode. It really would have been nice to add that. But
it's cool that we started the conversation, and maybe we can.
Well, we've done that in the past. We start a conversation and have to come back, and just the research in this was kind of funny, and I found something kind of interesting. Do you know what the difference between genealogy and gynecology is?
Oh, stop.
Oh, no. Here it goes.
Oh, here it goes.
What?
I feel a joke coming on.
What? Really? What? Y'all got me that much?
Yeah.
Genealogy is looking at the family tree.
Right.
Okay? Gynecology is looking at the family bush.
You're bad. So bad.
I'm sorry. Y'all gotta know I gotta throw some humor in here somehow.
I know you do.
But it's fascinating too, and for our listeners, we love getting mail and stuff like that. Let us know what y'all think.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm telling you, all spectrums. If you're for it, let us know. If you're against it, let us know. If you have some fears about it, let us know what your thought process is, or if you have some experiences in this, let us know that too, because this is fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Because we're at this is a new technology. I mean, if you think about it, when they first started bringing in fingerprints,
Oh, yeah.
and how fascinating that was for law enforcement and for people. And when DNA first started popping on the ground, and this is a whole new forensic tool.
Right.
That's just very fascinating. And we're on
that's why I was choosing to kind of be a little more optimistic than the opposite. Well, like I do think that this is probably going to be more beneficial than it isn't. That I think there like with
now,
anything.
I agree with you. I think in the future it may change.
Maybe.
But, yeah.
And again, with anything, there's always I guess room for corruption. But I think that's also our opportunity as citizens to stand up and and really make sure we hold people accountable for that sort of stuff. But like at the same time, like I don't know. In the short term, right now, it's you give a good point. Whenever you're born, whether you like it or not, you give fingerprints, footprints, you have a birth certificate, a social security number, and
your blood type,
like
everything.
Unless you do that,
but there's really there's really no national database that's gathering all that.
I mean, but
there wasn't then.
What
but I think there is
saying
now.
is like again with a lot of those touchstones like that, you can identify anybody really. But I mean, maybe I'm naive, but I don't know. I feel like even right now with just people's use of the internet, it is very easy to find anybody, whether it be Facebook or Google searches or whatever it is. Like, I mean, I don't know. So maybe I'm wrong, but you're right though. I think I see what you're saying now that we've had this discussion about like the implications that kind of I guess getting you more heavily involved if it's like a closer relative. And again, but I also think some of that's just the struggles of it being a new technology and things.
Well, I think the way it's done with some of these companies is just simply if police want access to them, then they would just have to get a warrant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
I get that.
Get a warrant. That's an easy way of getting around.
Yeah,
where the police would have to articulate to a judge, hey, we've got a reasonable suspicion. We think we'll be able to find some information in these third-party databases, and so that option is always there. So I mean, it's
right.
Yeah, it's
an interesting conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I knew this was going to be fun, but I didn't think I was going to get as involved as I did. So,
well, that's what we want.
Exactly.
We want people being involved, and we want our listeners to. What's our email again?
Get offended together.
At gmail.com. There we go. And let us know what you think.
We also, again, we've been kind of pushing this a little bit, but we have a YouTube channel at Retrospect Pod. So if you type that in the little search bar, you should be able to find us. And on those episodes as well, you can leave comments there. And I usually try and keep an eye on it. So if you do end up commenting on those videos, I usually will respond or try and throw it to these guys so that they can give a response as well. But yeah, so I mean, I'm excited. We have a couple of guests coming up in the next few weeks that I'm excited to hear about. Some have not fully confirmed, and some have. So I think it's going to be. We got a couple episodes coming up in this month that are super exciting. So
well, this has been fun, guys.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot about this.
It was fun to research this one. Actually, it was really fun to research it.
I want to say it was a week or so ago. You sat down and kind of threw out the idea, and I was like, I've never heard anything about it, but I'm for it. It sounds like an interesting topic. So,
well, yeah, it's there's a lot of info, and I think it's just going to grow more and more.
Of course,
because it's just not going to stop. People are going to, as people are more conscious of their health and wanting to know, okay, what potential defects I may have, because we all have them.
Of course.
What do I need to look out for? I could see a tremendous use on your health care. I know.
And then now, okay, prepare, because I'm going to make Ian's head explode. When you combine that genetic information in large databases with AI, where does that go?
Well, again, I think it could be used for good
and bad.
And
that's
good
right.
for bad as well. Because I mean, something that I've been thinking about in recent years is the fact that I think there's some pre-existing digestive stuff in my family that with my youngest brother now having ulcerative colitis. I think my dad has had some issues. I haven't had anything diagnosed so far, but like I've been more conscious about my gut health because of that. Because now I'm like, I mean, there may be some pre-existing stuff there that I need to watch out for. So, but anyways, this has been fun.
Yes,
I'm excited.
Been a good episode.
It was a fun one. I say it again. It was fun to research this one because there was a lot of stuff you're like, wow.
I do think if we were able to find somebody to pick back up on this conversation, or if someone else in the audience knows about somebody,
I may have somebody.
Okay.
I may too.
They already got them all locked down. I see how it is. So, anyways, I think it'd be cool to get that conversation started again. So,
hey, today's episode, we discussed and highlighted the remarkable role that genetic genealogy is playing in solving today's cold cases and bringing justice to long-forgotten crimes. The ability to trace a suspect through family connections has breathed new life into investigations that once seemed hopeless. As we've seen, this technology isn't just about connecting the dots in a family tree. It's about giving victims a voice, providing closure to families, and ensuring that justice is served, no matter how much time has passed. But with the power comes great responsibility, and especially how we handle and protect this sensitive data. As we continue to witness the profound impact of genetic genealogy in law enforcement, let's remain vigilant in balancing innovation with privacy, ensuring that the benefits are realized without compromising our ethical standards. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the big questions facing our world.
Until next week, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, everyone. God bless.
You're the best. Peace.